Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Foley today for Blockchain and Tackling NFTs in Sports and Entertainment. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Questions can be entered via the Q&A widget open on the left-hand side of your screen. We will plan to answer all questions post-program via email. If you experience technical difficulties during the program, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the help button below the presentation window, which is designated with the question mark icon. And now I will turn it over to John Israel, co-chair of Foley Sports and Entertainment Group. John, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. For those that don't know me, I am John Israel. I'm a partner in Foley Lardner's New York City office, one of 21 Foley offices across the U.S., 24 globally. We have about 1,200 attorneys practicing in a broad range of disciplines that you would expect to find in a general service law firm of that size like ours. And I am co-chair of the firm's Sports and Entertainment Group, which is a multidisciplinary team of attorneys with significant experience in the sports and entertainment industry, with several of us having spent time as in-house counsel at various professional organizations and entertainment companies. We like to say that as outside lawyers, our group brings a unique insider's perspective to the work we do for clients in the space. Now, in that vein, I spent about 8 years as an in-house lawyer at the NBA and have been watching with great interest the growth and publicity around NBA Top Shot, the blockchain-based platform launched last year that allows fans to buy, sell, and trade limited edition NBA licensed video moments as NFTs. And as we've seen, several NBA teams have followed suit with their own notable NFT drops, including the Charlotte Hornets. And we are lucky to have the team's general counsel, Tamara Daniels, here to give us some insights on that experience today. But of course, NFTs are not limited just to sports memorabilia and can be used to sell and trade unique, intangible, and tangible items, including virtual sneakers, digital art, and music. And possibilities do seem limitless. And it seems no matter how and in what ways NFTs involve, they are gaining traction as serious money and investment are flooding the space. And as business grows, so does its legal issues generally, both in number and magnitude. And indeed, growth in business is often a leading indicator of greater legal complications. So as we began working on NFT-related projects, it became clear to our group that we're addressing a range of legal and business matters involving NFTs, some novel, some not so novel, that cut across a significant cross-section of legal disciplines, from technology and data privacy to patents and platforms, crypto and blockchain, smart contracts and investment transactions, property rights and ownership, trademark and copyright, securities regulations. The list seems to be endless. There really is a plethora of diverse legal risks that lurk out there, and they can be tricky as the nascent aspects of NFTs and the related technology don't always neatly fit into long-standing legal principles and rules. And in this space, those rules often seem suddenly antiquated. But fortunately at Foley, we have the breadth of experience and expertise to cover those range of issues, which really prompted a group of us here to establish what we are calling now our NFT task force. And we really are a virtual one-stop shop for NFT-related legal needs. This group meets regularly. We support one another in ongoing projects and work. We're analyzing the latest developments, publishing thought pieces, and doing podcasts, and really developing a growing an expansive list of representative experience in the NFT space. All of that activity and information you can find on our webpage, the NFT Task Force webpage at Foley.com. And I think maybe we're going to throw up a link to that webpage so you can take a look at that at your leisure. The program today was hatched by that same NFT task force, and it was inspired in part by the virtual program on NFTs that we did back in May, which provided a general overview on NFTs and also featured some insights from a great group of guests who are working in the space. And we got some really good feedback after that program. And actually, it included many requests that we actually dial up the legal a bit. And honestly, it's not often that you find an audience, which wasn't just lawyers, asking for more legal discussion. But I guess it kind of makes sense here because the landscape is so fresh and so much is new with NFTs and working with them and analyzing them. People are just wondering what the legal issues might be that are implicated and how they might be addressed. So this time around, as we focus our attention on sports and entertainment, we're going with a slightly different format. First, we're going to hear from several of my Foley colleagues who are going to review in more detail the NFT-related issues and recent developments that are out there, including, for example, the security case against Dapper Labs and the lawsuit involving Jay-Z, Damon Dash, and Rockefeller Records. After that presentation, we're going to hear from our special guests, the aforementioned Tamara Daniels from the Charlotte Hornets and AJ Vaynerchuk, who is a principal in various self-titled businesses, including Vayner Sports, a full-service athlete representation firm. And with our pairing of AJ and Tamara, we're going to get a sports industry's perspective view from, I guess, the team side and the athlete side of things when it comes to NFTs. So there's lots to cover. I'm going to step aside and turn it over to my Foley colleagues for our legal review. So thank you again for joining us. And now over to my colleagues in Silicon Valley, Louis Lehot and Natasha Allen.
Thanks, John. You got Louis Lowe here, and thanks for the introduction and the nice words. I'm a newbie here at Foley Lardner, and just delighted to be able to participate in this team that John's put together. And thanks to all the folks out in the audience who have taken away an hour out of their day to join us and talk to us about this topic that we are all so passionate about. Which is NFTs. And, one of the reasons that I'm drawn to it is that it has so many disciplines of law that get picked up, as not to mention business. And I thought that as we begin, it would be helpful to kind of set the stage for, what is driving, in my eyes, the interest in NFTs out in the marketplace. And but before I do that, maybe Natasha, you might want to say a few words.
Yes, absolutely. So hello, everyone. As John mentioned, my name is Natasha Allen. I'm one of the partners in the Silicon Valley office. Similar to Louis, thank you for spending your time with us. We're ready and looking very excited to delve into all things that are NFT. But Louis, I'll let you go from there.
Well, thanks, Natasha. Really, we all started sitting at home and figuring out what to do with our time, how to get our work done, how to address the new world as we were seeing it a year and some ago, as we know. And sometime around May, we saw the price of digital assets really start to spike, May of 2020. We saw not only Elon Musk express a lot of interest in Bitcoin and various other cryptocurrencies, but he also put his money where his mouth was and had Tesla invest $1 billion into digital assets and specifically Bitcoin. Now, recently he's turned away from it, but that has not dampened enthusiasm for the sector, although it has put a downward pressure on the price of Bitcoin. And as we speak, I think the price is hovering around the $36,000 mark, which is still a heck of a lot more than zero. But we saw that at the same time that there was a hunger for digital assets, you had a category of content creators out in the universe that really were prevented from monetizing that. You had basketball teams, football teams, and sports and entertainment folks no longer able to do games or live events. And so stuck with that reality, how could they monetize what they were doing? And of course, there was still a huge hunger among spectators to stay in touch with performers and sports and entertainment players. And so the NFT was born, the non-fungible token. And Natasha, we struggled 4 years ago with the initial adoption of these coin offerings as to whether a digital asset was a security. And what in your mind has changed since then? And what do you think it makes a security today?
So I think that it's still speculative, right? Nothing is settled. The law is still all over the map. I think what will be happening is a lot of factual assessments, right? So the token itself may not be a security, but what you do with it and the action that you take with it may be a security. So we had alluded to the Dapper case, and that's an interesting kind of lawsuit that was filed in New York just in May. And it's tracking, or I say assessing, what secondary markets, so NFT secondary markets look like, and whether the application of what is called the Howey test could apply. And so that is dealing with, is there some type of profit that is being obtained by somebody else's efforts? So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with that case. Right now, as I said, there's nothing out there stating that NFT is a security, but it really is an assessment.
Thanks for that. And I personally think that that is an open and shut case, and there is no way that those NBA Top Shots are in fact securities. And I think they absolutely passed the Howey test, but that's just me. One of the interesting developments that's happened this year is we've seen venture capital firms and hedge funds not only put money into digital assets, but they've poured $17 billion into companies that are operating in the space, according to PitchBook. And that's more than any single year. And in fact, it's more than all recent years combined, and we're not even halfway done with the year. We saw our friends at Andreessen Horowitz up the road here in Silicon Valley raise a $2 billion crypto fund. And very interestingly, they hired my old boss, Bill Hinman, who is the outgoing chairman of the Division of Corporate Finance at the SEC, to be an advisor. And, I think that Bill did a tremendous service to the industry in a number of public statements, helping clarify what is and what is not a security. And I think that his great influence and prestige in the area and his association with A16 Crypto is going to really help further develop the sector. But nonetheless, we're still a little bit unsettled as to what the new Securities and Exchange Commission will have to say about it, and I don't see anything in the near term that will give us any definition. Although there is this case in New York State Court. If it's still in state court, I'm not sure if it's been removed to federal court. In any case, Natasha, besides the securities laws, what are the other areas of law that we immediately hone in on when we look at an NFT business model?
So just to go back to the Dapper case, I agree that it may be a open and closed case, but I think it really is going to maybe have open the door for other people to put forward, similar cases or feel like they have the opportunity to do so. But in terms of, other things that people will be looking at in terms of the application of regulations to NFTs, you have the Commodity Trading Commission which is very broad and might actually apply to NFTs. You have the anti-laundering, which is another organization. I know that FINRA was recently delving into what NFTs were and how they apply in terms of, the application of FINRA to NFTs themselves. You have different state and local organizations that haven't really delved into dealing with NFTs specifically, more so cryptocurrencies, but they are also taking a second look at what the implications are of NFTs, how should they be categorized, and how should they be, regulated. And also throwing in the mix is the IRS is also trying to figure out, how do we deal with NFTs and any type of, revenue or monetization that may occur with respect to NFTs.
And for everyone who's listening, I think the IRS looks at all of this as property. And if you buy property and it increases in value, you have gain. And whether or not that's taxed with capital gains rate or ordinary income rates or short-term capital or long-term capital gains rates is all subject to heavy debate in Washington, D.C. this summer. I hear the Senate's not even going to go into recess. There's so much going on. There's one area that really, I find is challenging with these NFT business models that I see, Natasha, and that's the application of money transmitter rules. As whether or not it's a security, certainly if you are processing the payments, whether in fiat currency or Bitcoin, into an NFT, and then distributing the proceeds of that sale to the various folks on the food chain that get a slice of those payments, there's a lot of transmission of funds going on. And in the United States, we have federal money transmitter laws, and then we have registration laws in 50 states, and even in the city of New York, it has its own registration there for money transmitters. So it's absolutely an area to watch out for. And what I'm finding is that when I see new companies with NFT business models is that one of the things we need to do is not only identify the legal issues, but help find for them the right business partners to accomplish their goals. And sometimes that's finding an already registered money transmitter so that you don't have to go through the hassle of registration federally or in various different states. And, we haven't even talked about the fact that, there's a whole wide world out there of other countries and their rules and regulations. And so partnering with a larger entity that has experience in money transmission is certainly a viable alternative. But before we segment off to our next colleagues, I thought, Natasha, would be helpful for us to just say a word about the various business partners that really need to be involved in the creation of an NFT. And obviously, first and foremost, you have those creators of content, whether it's sports players or franchises, whether it's musicians or artists of any kind. You've got to secure the content, and as we know, many of this, a lot of the content has already been monetized in some other fashion. So, for example, a musician may have already sold their library of songs to a record label, and yet they still have retained some rights. And so, if they're to receive a payment in respect of the sale of an NFT regarding their music, whether it's a clip or an album cover or whatever, do they have to share those payments with their record label? And most likely, there's a lot of analysis that's going to go into that. Then there's going to be, the commercial agreement that's going to exist between the creator of the content and the creator of the smart contract who's going to mint the token. Then there is, of course, the marketplace where the token gets listed, and then there are the money transmitters and various vendors that perform tasks along the food chain. And with that, Natasha, I think we've got a great lineup of folks to address those issues, and I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Louis. I think that, as John had mentioned before, we have great expertise at Foley in terms of addressing all of those aspects of an NFT. Next up, though, will be Andy Lee, and he will be talking about smart contracts. So we will end here, and Andy, on to you.
Thanks, Natasha and Louis. Appreciate that. My name's Andy Lee. I am here in Foley's New York office, and I'm a member of the Sports and Entertainment Group, along with John Israel. So we do a lot of work in the sports and entertainment space generally, but I also have a technology practice, and I'm a member of the NFT task force that we've formed here at Foley. And we've been spending a lot of time working on these issues for our clients on specific projects, and also getting up to speed on things to be prepared for what's coming down the pike. So I'm going to talk about smart contracts for a few minutes, which are basically what powers NFTs on blockchain. The most notable blockchain example of that being Ethereum. We all think about Bitcoin on the blockchain, which traditionally Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are developed as a technology with the limited purpose of just executing transactions. But as blockchain expanded and evolved, Ethereum, for example, came up with a new, it was in conjunction with Ethereum, a new smart contract programming language called Solidity. There are others as well, but which allows the smart contract to include self-executing rules for the future beyond the initial transaction, just the exchange of money. And that's what gives rise to this notion of smart contracts that I think really opens a lot of possibilities for NFTs to move into interesting applications and areas more than just collectibles and moments and things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about what the smart contract is and how it operates. But before I get to that, I thought it would be a good idea to actually show you an example. So I had basically I went and created an NFT, which I'm putting up on screen here. Hopefully everyone can see it. This is based on a painting that my wife had done. We created an image of it, animated it, minted an NFT on Ethereum. And this is what the listing page looks like. You see the NFT there. There's a place on the page where you can click on the contract ID to actually see what the contract itself looks like. So if you were to do that, you get essentially a version of this. This is the actual computer code embodying the smart contract. Actually, this is only about a third of it. That's all I could fit on this page. So Ethereum and the various sites that operate this gives you the ability to see that code, and also to use what's called a decompiler, so you can translate that into human readable form, which I'll show you an example of here. We're scrolling through the actual code, click on the decompiler, and you have a version of, most of this is, there's a lot of English words in here, but still, as you go down, I'm scrolling through it, there's about 1,500 lines of programming code that is not really understandable or decipherable in the way that we typically think of for a contract that a business person or a lawyer might think of in a contract. So the smart contract itself is essentially, a guy named Nick Szabo coined the phrase back in 1996, and he said a smart contract is a set of promises specified in digital form, including protocols within which the parties perform on those promises. And an example Szabo gave of how to think about a smart contract is he compared it to a vending machine. So if you think about the logic of a vending machine is basically money plus snack selection equals snack dispensed. What it's done is it's done away with the need for a vendor employee to be there to take your money and give you your snack. Ethereum has that example on one of their sort of FAQ pages, and then they take that one line of logic, money plus snack selection equals snack dispensed, and they basically write it as a smart contract, and it takes about 30 lines of computer code that doesn't really make much sense to anyone from an English perspective. So the point being, yes, we have these smart contracts. We do expect them to evolve into other areas and be a part of the technology and different types of transactions going forward. But how are we going to deal with issues that inevitably come up? On the one hand, a smart contract, because it's computer code, there's a guaranteed input and a guaranteed output. There shouldn't be much need for interpretation, but in reality, we know that disputes over contract interpretation basically are as old as the law itself. And that's really what led to the modern notion under the law of seeking out the objective intention of the parties based on the plain language of the four corners of the contract. So as I just showed you, the four corners of the contract here are not really legible. How would a judge look at this? I mean, we can see the corners of this box of code here, but there's not an easy way to understand what it actually means. And then how would a judge deal with that? Presumably, there would be experts who would come in and talk about what the smart contract, in the event of a dispute, what it said and what it meant and how it operated. In many ways, like an expert might have to come into a contract dispute and give testimony about what certain terms or phrases mean based on industry custom and usage. So there are, and even though the contract itself in the execution of its instructions really shouldn't be able to make a mistake, there could be coding errors. There could be things that come up. I saw an interesting example in the United Kingdom's Law Commission recently commissioned a call for evidence about smart contracts. So here's an example of a government looking into ways to build out this concept in its legal system, and I think that's part of what we're going to see happen here with smart contracts. But that document has an interesting example in which it says basically. Imagine this example. The instructions are to go to the store and buy a newspaper. If there are eggs, get a dozen, right? And the paper points out that a human being would get eggs, right? Would probably come back with a dozen eggs if there are eggs there. But go to the store and buy a newspaper. If there are eggs, get a dozen. If you converted that into computer programming logic, the computer might read it as get a dozen newspapers, not a dozen eggs. So you have examples like that where the code might not reflect the actual intention of the parties. There may also be issues in terms of contract disputes where the contract itself is supplemented by other terms. For example, on this NFT page, there could be, if we were able to scroll down, there are descriptions of the product, or there might be descriptions of what the NFT is or what you're getting or certain off-chain benefits. And how do you deal with inconsistent terms where you might have a conflict between that description and what the smart contract actually says or deploys? Of course, the party viewing something like this has no way in the moment of deciphering what the smart contract actually says, so they're going to rely on what the collateral material says. You might also have instances where a smart contract incorporates actual natural language terms, like much in the way that a master services agreement might attach terms and conditions. So it could include some sort of a reference to an external PDF or actual natural language document that is external to the smart contract itself and lives on a secure server or someplace else on the internet, which in itself sort of raises the question of is that a vulnerability in the immutability of this smart contract? And of course, you also have to deal with the fact that there can be coding errors, there can be mistakes. Back in 2016, there was a hack of the Ethereum system where someone made off with $50 million worth of Ethereum based on a vulnerability that was overlooked in many smart contracts. So we all think of the blockchain as being irreversible and immutable is the big word. But what happened then was the Ethereum community basically put together a vote. Some small percentage of Ethereum holders or node keepers of the Ethereum community voted to do what was called a hard fork. And they reversed everything. They started a new blockchain, almost like I thought about in Back to the Future Part 2, where they talk about an alternate reality where time breaks off. So they went back to the block on the blockchain just before the hack and created a new Ethereum blockchain, leaving the old one as classic Ethereum. So they were able to undo that. Just like with the Law Commission example I gave, the call for evidence from the United Kingdom, where I believe we're going to see instances, and there isn't much yet. There's very little as far as I can tell and have found, there are no judicial opinions out there tackling these issues yet, specifically the interpretation of smart contracts. There are very few references to smart contracts at all, and most of them are in the context of cases about whether a particular cryptocurrency qualifies as a security, along the lines we were discussing or hearing about earlier from Louis. But as these contracts start getting to be deployed in more transactional ways that expand beyond the scope of merely ownership of a particular piece of property, I believe we will see these cases come into the courts, and they will end up getting interpreted, and a body of law will develop both through judicial interpretation and through legislation. So if we think about back in the 80s when there was litigation over shrink wrap licenses, which became litigation over click wrap licenses in the 90s and the 2000s. And then we had the development of electronic signatures and all of the litigation and legislation that has now made that a normal part of our lives, where everyone on this call, I'm sure, has used DocuSign or Adobe Sign or just emails back and forth to do what in the past would have had to been done in physical writing. So I think that we're going to see an evolution of the law applicable to the enforceability and interpretation of smart contracts in similar ways. In fact, many states already have laws proposed to try to deal with. New York is one of them. Not too long ago, Assembly Bill A3760 was introduced. It's now in committee, but it is an amendment of the technology law that specifically defines blockchain technology and smart contracts, and makes it clear that signatures effected through blockchain technology or smart contracts qualify as electronic records for purposes of electronic signatures. And they also specifically, the New York proposed statute, for example, says that smart contracts may exist in commerce. A contract relating to a transaction may not be denied legal effect, validity, or enforceability solely because that contract contains a smart contract term. There are other parts of the statute that are also interesting, and I think it will evolve because the legislators who are writing this might not fully understand the technology in ways that the language they use may impact. But there are several states out there doing this already. So I think it's something to keep an eye on as we get into different applications. There will be opportunities to structure your transactions and your smart contracts based on the evolution of the law up to that point. The other issue, there are also back-end issues to think about in terms of these contracts and the way you write them, and how they get affected and rolled out. Things like violations of the security laws, in the Dapper Labs case, it's that Lou was discussing earlier, and Natasha. It's a class action lawsuit over the Top Shot moments that is basically seeking rescissory damages based on securities law violations. So they're basically seeking to get all the money back and undo the transaction. Same type of thing could happen with various consumer protection laws in various states, particularly where an NFT offering is being made to the general public. So again, there are no cases yet specifically applying those types of statutes to NFTs, but I do believe we're going to start seeing them soon as NFTs start getting used in different ways. In the sports and entertainment industry, I think we will see examples of that that go beyond collectibles, as I said. So one could envision a season ticket holder's season ticket account being embodied in an NFT for a season, or the purchase of a personal seat license or other sort of ongoing right to buy tickets to at a venue or to concerts being embodied in an NFT in a way that makes it easy to transfer and to sell later on the secondary market, but is also easy to track, is very efficient, and very, very secure. Other things that we see in the industry, there are things called fan tokens that are a little different than NFTs, but could be incorporated into NFTs. They involve tokens that give the token holders rights to, for example, to vote on certain things that a team or business may decide to do. One example is the soccer club Juventus had an issue where they allowed their token holders, and only the token holders, to vote for the design of their new bus, for example. So you have the sports properties looking for new and different ways to engage with and interact with fans, and the NFT and this technology presents an opportunity. Another example may be sports betting. There's a concept in smart contracts where sometimes if the smart contract needs to look at something external, that in order to trigger one of its parameters, that external source is called an oracle. I can imagine seeing these types of NFTs being deployed in the sports betting universe, where there is sports betting data that is easily verifiable, and could be used as an oracle to affect the algorithm in a particular NFT. And I think we're also going to see, and we are seeing already, individual players and entertainers getting very interested in looking for ways to capitalize on NFTs in the context of the rights that they may retain relative to their league or their team or their record company or their publisher, trying to find where's that sliver of rights that I can operate in a way that is going to allow me, the player or the entertainer, to interact directly and engage with my fans in new ways. Some of these include off-chain benefits like lifetime tickets to shows, or a private listening party hosted by the band or a player, or watching something online. There's lots of examples like that we can expect to see. So I think basically going to my takeaway slide before I hand this off to Eric. This is how I think we're going to see smart contracts, which is one part of the NFT landscape here, start to evolve based on reactions from lawsuits, from the judiciary, and from legislatures that try to make this concept evolve in a way that actually works for a broader set of transactions in the bigger world. So that said, I'm trying to stay on schedule here. I'm going to turn this over to Foley partner Eric Sofer, who is a patent lawyer and member of our electronics practice, a resident in our DC office. Eric, over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Andy. I'm gonna leave up the whether everyone can see me. I'm gonna leave up the key takeaways while we're talking here. Once again, I'm Eric Sofer, partner in the DC office, and I spend my time focusing on patent counseling. And when an interesting technology arises, we look at how we could gain a competitive advantage from it. Patents are a great tool to lock up a technology, get a monopoly, even before you build your system or even build a prototype. And as this industry builds, you can put yourself in a position where you have the right to exclude others from using your idea for the next 20 years or so. Louis and Natasha were speaking about how the regulatory framework is unsettled. There are no standards yet, but really even a lot of best practices. It's wide open for established companies that focus on blockchain-based technology, and for others who are new to NFTs to innovate a solution to a problem. Perhaps you solved an identified problem, or part of your innovation was identifying a problem that others weren't even aware of yet. So where do we start with looking for what to protect? We probably want to focus on the solutions to those problems plaguing each industry. Those could be problems where the NFT is the solution. Alternatively, the NFT framework may need the innovative solution for widespread adoption, ease of use, security, or some other concern. We've seen innovations involving the displays of NFTs, tracking provenance, and new minting techniques. Andy was discussing smart contracts. Those are full of patenting opportunities. Just a quick note as a follow-up, by the way, when we talk about patenting, we aren't disclosing any of the code. None of that underlying code needs to be submitted in a patent application. In fact, we don't even need to have code or even have it built yet. We could just do this based on your idea. Now, the basic smart contract structure been around for years, probably not protectable anymore in its current form. But the various triggers and actions in a smart contract, particularly as a computer automatically causes an action to be taken, are particularly interesting from a patent perspective. One question we sometimes hear is whether you can patent an NFT for a different type of media. Instead of art or a photo, maybe it's social networking message or some sort of video. An NFT with a particular underlying media may be patentable. Perhaps the innovation is based on how the NFT is tied to the underlying object. Perhaps the innovation involves the mint dating. We want to consider how the NFT is used. Perhaps it's within a video game or within commerce. Andy mentioned Juventus. The innovation could be a voting system based on NFTs. It's all on the table right now. There are innovations coming from all directions, besides artwork and photos, including the music industry, collectibles, tickets, and even sneakers. Some innovations seem to solve a problem using NFTs. Others may be looking to ride that wave of innovation. For those that think NFT is kind of a bubble, while there are a few entities also looking to protect NFTs where maybe there isn't really a compelling need. Sometimes a conventional blockchain approach is sufficient, and the added NFT functionality maybe it's just extraneous. In the patent community, one hot topic is the collaboration of IBM and an entity called IPWE to create an NFT-based system for tracking complex licensing arrangements. It's not really necessary for just tracking ownership or simple licenses. This is done by the Patent Office's assignment database or other contract management software. But if you have more complex arrangements useful in cross-licenses or patents licensed to different entities with different fields of use, then it could be more interesting. Perhaps you license a family of patents to Company A for one field of use and Company B for only the U.S. patents in another field of use. Then a sub-licensee of Company A can better understand their rights through this platform. Or maybe you then want to license it to Company C, and this system will help you let you know what's been licensed or where there might be additional room for licensing as it tries to tie each clause or each aspect of the license to an NFT. It's interesting. It's an interesting application for sure, but I think the usefulness really depends on your particular contract management needs. Because there's so much white space for innovation, there's a mad rush to the Patent Office. It's kind of like the Wild West. Innovators are eager to capture as much protection as possible. Because the Patent Office, at least in the US, has a first-to-file system, there's some incentive to get your patent application filed before someone with a similar idea. If two people independently come up with the same idea, the later filed application is probably going to be precluded from protection. The Patent Office often encounters new technologies. The fact that NFTs are new to them for a couple hundred years, the Patent Office has been dealing with new technologies as they arise. But in some ways, they aren't really ready for it. The Patent Office is organized by technology area, and there aren't really any examiners with NFT expertise, I'm assuming. When there was a ramp up in blockchain-related technologies, the applications were distributed to various groups around the Patent Office. Some went to software, some went to business methods, and then others. Some examiners were actually quite savvy, but others didn't really have the basic understanding of how blockchain works. It could affect patent quality as examiners are learning more about the technology, but it's up to us to educate them as well. It usually takes a critical mass of submissions, enough applications being filed that they see more of it, some prior art to build up, and of course, with NFTs, there's plenty of articles out there and lots of press these days. And then also the training of the examiners, both internally within the Patent Office and by the applicants. There are a few hurdles for patent protection, but two are really noteworthy. The first is patent eligibility, what we refer to as Section 101, and people associate that with business methods, but it's really an issue for all software inventions and others. Essentially, patent eligibility is a threshold for patenting when the idea has been around for a while and it's now being tied to a new technology, such as taking a conventional method and now putting it on a website. Or it could be an idea that but it's being done by a computer because a computer is more efficient than a human. But in reality, the invention doesn't really need a computer. We know that a computer is more efficient in calculations, and it's meant to store files and transmit files and receive files and do some data manipulation. But we're looking at what the computer is doing beyond that ties that process to the computer environment. There are some compelling arguments that NFT innovations are more than just an application of a new technology. It can't be done without a computer. But to be a devil's advocate, let's consider a basic NFT transaction on a blockchain. An entity mints an NFT and transfers ownership to another entity. As blockchain uses become more widespread, will this technology, including the exchange of ownership, be considered generic the way conventional databases are? Maybe one day. If so, we may raise the bar for what a particular innovation does beyond that typical blockchain functionality. So as we prepare patent applications, we consider other aspects that are more forward-thinking and proactive approaches to those types of concerns. The other issue to consider is prior art. And this is what we refer to as sections 102 and 103 in the patent world. Who's done this before, and is it really just an obvious variation of what's been done before? There isn't really a trove of prior art right now, other than a lot of those articles that we've seen. And to the extent that similar functionality has been offered before, it probably doesn't use the terminology non-fungible token. It may say something like cryptographic digital asset. We saw the same thing with artificial intelligence as well. Artificial intelligence been very popular lately in the last few years, and examiners are getting up to speed, though a few years ago, there weren't as many applications that characterized it as artificial intelligence or machine learning. There were other terms that they used for it, and we're dealing with a similar situation with NFTs and the terminology here. Now, it may be a bit early to have the benefit of a patentability search because there just isn't a lot out there yet. We usually look at prior art, articles, patent applications, just like the examiners are going to do when they examine a patent application. But we need to consider those alternate ways of characterizing the technology. And it's going to require someone who can not just perform a keyword search and find synonyms, but really understand the underlying technology to make sure it's an equivalent to what the NFT platform is proposing. So just like some basic internet searching, a keyword search may not be as productive. So we know that there's innovation in lots of aspects of this technology. Will it be patentable? Some of it, for sure, it definitely will be. Other innovations, maybe they fall in the gray area, maybe. But this is such a pioneering technology right now. The best practice is probably just go for it. See what kind of land grab you can make, and worry later about the scope and what others have been protecting as well. Tremendous amount of opportunities out there right now, though. Now, patents are just a component of a comprehensive IP strategy. So let's turn it over to Laura Ganoza to hear about some other IP considerations.
Thank you so much, Eric. Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Ganoza, and I'm resident at the firm's Miami office, where I am the chair of the litigation department, and I focus on IP litigation, trademarks, and copyrights. And I also head the firm's fashion, apparel, and beauty group. And I'm a member of the NFT task force. And as a person who focuses a lot on IP litigation, I was really interested, and I'm following with great interest what I think is the first NFT lawsuit involving IP rights, and that's the case involving Rockefeller Records versus Damon Dash. So for those of you who aren't aware of it, it all basically revolves around the 1996 album, iconic album, I should say, of Jay-Z called Reasonable Doubt. And Rockefeller Records, Inc. is the owner of all the copyrights to that album. And Rockefeller, the company, has 3 shareholders. Each of them have 1/3 interest in the company, and one of those shareholders is Damon Dash. And in June 18th of 2021, Rockefeller sued Damon Dash to stop an NFT that Damon Dash was planning on selling. And it's really important to see what the press release that was talking about the NFT actually said. And this goes back to some of the comments that Andy was making in terms of, the description of the NFT is not necessarily going to be found in the code that's not really readable, but instead in just the language describing what it is. And the NFT was actually described, and I have it here in the PowerPoint so you can see the actual language. It's the auction of Damon's ownership of the copyright to Jay-Z's first album, Reasonable Doubt, entitling the new owner to future revenue generated by the unique asset. And there was additional statements made in this press release that this was a groundbreaking and landmark sale of the copyright to Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt as an NFT. And the newly minted NFT will provide ownership of the album's copyright, transferring the rights to all future revenue generated by the album from Damon Dash to the auction winner. Well, that set off alarm bells, and Rockefeller sued Damon Dash to stop the sale. And they ended up getting a temporary injunction. And in fact, there's a hearing tomorrow to determine if that's going to be converted to a preliminary injunction. And I've been keeping up with the docket, which reads a little bit like a soap opera. And it may be the case that this is not an IP case after all. Damon Dash is arguing that, oh, no, this was a mistake. I was not ever planning to sell the copyright to the album. I recognize I don't own that. I was just trying to sell my 1/3 interest in the company, and you can't stop me from selling my shares in Rockefeller Records. So ultimately, we're going to see how this all shakes out with the court and what the court does about that, whether this is really an IP case or not. But I do think that it really, regardless of what happens with this case, it does have a lot of implications and brings to mind some things that people should be thinking about when thinking about the NFT space and IP in general. And the first key takeaway is that, NFTs, they're here to stay, at least for now. And people are looking at this as a way to cash in, as Andy was saying as well, trying to change the way that something that may already be out there, try to monetize it in a different way. So NFTs are here to stay, because who's to say if Damon Dash wanted to sell either the copyrights or even just his shares in the company about 1.5 years ago, is this the way he would have done it? Or is it just now that this is the new trend for trying to generate income in this way? So just starting with that, NFTs are here. People are going to find ways to use them. But until the law catches up, or until there's legislation, or until there's court cases that test it, you still have to keep in mind the traditional notions of contract law, property law, trademark law, copyright, all the kinds of laws that you would typically apply. You still have to apply them in this space until maybe there is legislation like the type that we've been discussing that may be coming down in New York, and then maybe other courts will follow, other states will follow suit, or in the Dapper Lab case, maybe if we get some kinds of ruling from the court as to what is or is not a security in the NFT realm. But in the meantime, thinking about what you should think about is step back and think about this in the traditional ways. And the most important thing, especially if you're a creator and you're putting something out there, is what are you selling as an NFT? Because that's going to be key. And as you can see with what happened in this case, the reason there's even a lawsuit, I guess, is because the way the NFT was described was that it was selling the copyright to this album. And if that's the case, let's assume if there hadn't been a lawsuit and the sale had gone forward, what would that buyer have really gotten? if it was promoted one way, but then you're sold a different thing, those traditional notions of contract law are still going to apply. And so think about, as a creator, you have to think about first, okay, what is it that we're actually selling? And then promote it in that way. And then secondly, if you're thinking about what you're selling, you have to think about all the rights that surround what you're selling. Who is the owner of those rights? Are you the creator, the exclusive owner? Are there other owners, or are there limits? Are there licensing agreements in place that prevent certain things from happening? I mean, all those kinds of things are things that you need to look into, just as you would be doing if you were just selling something else in a more tangible fashion. So just because it's in an NFT doesn't mean that you throw away all the notions of the law that exists. Now, that doesn't mean you can't test them, and there may be cases where, yes, indeed, there is a contract already in place, but it does not apply to this set of scenarios, and you can change that up, and it may actually cause reason to review certain contracts, review certain licensing agreements to see if, hey, now there's this new technology out there. Are the agreements that we have in place sufficiently worded to cover these kinds of this new technology and these potential new ways to monetize whatever the underlying art or work or IP there is that you may be trying to sell. So that's very important to do before you launch any kind of NFT, is to think about all of those things. And also, if you are on the other side and you want to enforce against someone using NFTs, again, merely because something's an NFT doesn't mean it automatically loses certain rights. So you have to check to see, okay, is this something I can enforce against? Are there going to be First Amendment considerations for a piece of art, for example? Are there going to be freedom of expression, fair use examples? If somebody takes something that maybe a brand owns but changes it in a way that creates a new piece of work, and to the principles of fair use and First Amendment free expression rights, those may trump what the ultimate item is that's being sold. So the key takeaway, I think, is that, as I think all of us have said in this webinar today, is that this still is really an evolving area of the law. And you have to take with it the fact that, the law is going to have to evolve with it. The courts are going to have to evolve with it. And we're just going to have to keep the discussion going, keep seeing how these matters continue to develop. And part of that is what we're doing here today, in that we have two people that are in the industry who are going to keep that conversation going. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to my partner, John Israel, who's going to introduce our panelists, and they're going to talk about their own experience in this space. So John, take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And thanks to the rest of the members here of the Foley NFT Task Force for cutting through just some of the relevant legal issues and developments in the NFT space today. Really appreciated hearing all of that. But as Laura said, let's now pivot to our special guests who are going to share their insights and experiences with NFTs and help us consider those legal issues in a practical and real context. And as I mentioned earlier, with us today is Tamara Daniels. Tamara's an experienced lawyer who's currently the Senior Vice President and General Counsel with the Charlotte Hornets, one of the first NBA teams to mint an NFT. And before that, Tamara was the Vice President and General Counsel of the NHL's Vegas Golden Knights. And joining Tamara is AJ Vaynerchuk, an entrepreneur and investor who has guided various self-titled businesses, including Vayner Sports, an athlete representation firm, Vayner RSE, a fund focused on investing in and building tomorrow's companies, and Vayner Media, a social-first digital agency. And AJ is actively involved in the NFT space. In fact, I saw the other day he tweeted out that he just acquired a physical NFT of Emmanuel Quickley of the New York Knicks. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about what a physical NFT is in this presumably digital world that we are operating in. But facilitating this conversation with our two guests are two of my Foley colleagues, Andy Lee, whom you already met, who I'm going to spare a further introduction. And I also want to introduce Catherine Zhu, who's in our Silicon Valley office. And Catherine's an experienced commercial and privacy lawyer whose practice is focused on complex commercial agreements, licensing transactions, data sharing transactions, business expansion, and data privacy. She, too, has experience with NFT projects, including recently work for the Milwaukee Bucks and its NFT drop memorabilia from their 1970s championship season. So I'm going to kick it over to Catherine, and let's hear from our guests.
Thank you, John. Great to be here today, and thank you everyone in the audience for taking time out of your day to join our discussion. Tamara and AJ, really excited to have you both here. Thank you for taking the time. And as I think I was going to do intros, but I think I'll spare them as well because John did such a great job right before this for everybody, and we can jump right into the discussion. So Tamara, as John mentioned, I know you, as the Hornets, you were one of the front runners in, being one of the first professional sports teams and getting into the NFT launch. The NFT that you launched was really successful, very fan friendly. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came together and just your experience going through that? I think, Tamara, you're on mute.
We can't hear you. Okay, well, why don't we, I think Jenny's working on that for Tamara. Let's let her interrupt as soon as she gets the audio going. But AJ, in the meantime, similar question for you. You guys recently did the VFriends launch with your brother Gary. As I understand it, it's one of the most actively traded NFTs out there. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was? And Tamara, speak up if you feel like it. Just interrupt if you get your volume back. But go ahead, AJ.
Sure thing. Do you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, as you mentioned, my brother Gary, I helped him launch a project called VFriends. It's an interesting NFT project from this perspective of it is an example of creating intellectual property from NFTs as opposed to the other way around, right? So NBA Top Shot and what Tamara did with the Charlotte Hornets is a great example of taking an existing IP that has affinity and bringing it into the NFT landscape. What my brother and I are trying to do is actually flip that funnel and go the other way, where we want to build intellectual property that's long-standing for decades to come, but the origination of that intellectual property is done via NFT. And so that project features roughly 250 hand-drawn characters that my brother actually physically drew himself, and then we digitized them. And it's structured in a collectibles format. It's a little bit of a hybrid of Pokemon and sports cards, I think is the easiest way to describe it, in the sense that Pokemon because it's fictional characters, but sports cards because there is some of that similar parallel in terms of, for one of the characters, for example, Patient Panda is one of the characters of VFriends. And for Patient Panda, there are 20 core tokens that are all white background and basic and simple. But then from there, there's actually 8 rare tokens with a brown background, 5 very rare tokens with an orange background, 2 green tokens that are called epics, and then there's individual one-of-ones called spectaculars. So one of them has a holographic background, one has a bubblegum type background. And so there is this rarity and scarcity component to it. And we launched it about 6 weeks ago. It's done very well. Andy, to your point, it's one of the most actively traded collectibles in the space. I'm looking at the last 30 days. There's been about $10 million worth of secondary sales for that, which ranks it in the top 7 of all NFT projects, along with things like NBA Top Shot, which I mentioned, and CryptoPunks being another popular NFT project.
That's interesting. Where are you tracking that? Is like compared to other?
Yeah, you can see it. There's a great website called CryptoSlam. It's cryptoslam.io. And what they do is they give you the 24-hour, the 7-day, the 30-day, and the all-time sales by volume. And this all tracks secondary sales. So, for example, when we first dropped the project and sold the VFriends direct-to-consumer, those transactions did not count towards CryptoSlam's accounting. They're only tracking consumer-to-consumer secondary market sales.
Got it. Tamara, are you with us now?
I mean, I've been here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you now.
I just want everyone to know that I do understand how to unmute, and I was not unmute. So please don't have that reflect negatively on my skill set here.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I'm so glad you got your audio back. And I don't want to cut you off, AJ or Andy. So why don't we finish that segment, and then we can kind of go back to the first question we had.
Why don't we, let Tamara go back to what she was talking about there.
I think the question was a broad overview maybe of our NFT project. And so at the Hornets, I oversee strategy and innovation. As part of that, I oversee certain projects like our NFT project. I also oversee our 2K team, which is our NBA 2K esports team called the Venom. And we're mid-season right now for the Venom. But so we, as part of a leadership meeting, we started talking about the topic of NFTs, and we kind of just decided that we wanted to get into the space. And so I took the lead on the project, and the way we started was just to put together a group of stakeholders who are interested, everyone from the leadership team to people in all different departments, anybody who had any interest in the space whatsoever. And we kind of put together a brainstorm group. And we had a 1-hour meeting for each Monday of 4 Mondays to try to hone in on exactly what we wanted to do in the space and how we thought it would work. And so we ultimately landed on wanting to do a digital ticket because we thought it was the most fan-friendly, because there's a little bit of education that goes into this space. I think, as you guys heard throughout today's presentation, that blockchain technology has a lot of different iterations, everything from cryptocurrency to coins to tokens. And then within tokens, there's a whole lot of other subsets, like whether it's a social token, whether it's a utility token, whether it's a security token, all of those things. And so we wanted to do something that our average fan could understand and could afford to get into. And so we ultimately decided that a digital ticket was the way to go for now. So we have launched 3, which are part of a series to be continued into next season. And the idea is that at the end of the series, those individuals who have collected all in the series will be entitled to a unique experience, which we have not announced yet.
Well, that's very exciting and very innovative. I will say it's a bit of a different from some of the other team NFTs that have launched. They haven't taken necessarily a very, easy or, large volume approach, right? They might sell 1 or 2, but you guys have really prioritized the fans, which is very, very exciting. In terms of carrying this out, Tamara, what role did kind of you guys play as a team, the players, and then the league? Was there, did different stakeholders play different roles, or was it more of a united effort?
So the players were not involved because obviously the league and the Players Association and the players themselves have rights to the players' likeness as well as game moments. So we were limited to what the team entity owns from an IP perspective, which is our name, logos, and that's how we landed on the digital ticket. So our NFT is there's an unboxing element, which is an exploding hive, and then the ticket lives inside that exploding hive. And so we released this at the fan appreciation game, which was the last regular season home game in our season against the Clippers. And then the second one was for the first play-in round. And then the third one was actually for the Venom, which is our 2K team. And so we really approached the project from the business standpoint. So it was the business stakeholders from ticketing, sponsorship, marketing, business intelligence, those types of groups.
Awesome. Go ahead.
No, well, leading off of that, you're talking about the sort of splitting off with the players. I'm curious whether either of you, and AJ, maybe you have some insight into this. What you're doing with Gary, right? In a sense, Gary's a talent, but he's also, the business. And but you guys interact with athletes and represent athletes as well. What are you seeing, or what do you expect to see on the talent side, meaning the athletes or the actual entertainers, in terms of how they want to use NFTs?
Sure. So yeah, Tamara highlighted that when it comes to the intellectual property and the opportunity with NFT, when it comes to the league, the teams and players, it is a bit fragmented. Everybody has what they have ownership over, and the players have the union in most sports. What you've seen so far is a mixed bag. NBA Top Shot, I brought it up once, and I'll bring it up again, is a good example where the league and the players together built a property in connection with Dapper Labs on the Flow blockchain that has had some good success, very good success. Then you've had a group of players attempt to do it on their own. I think Patrick Mahomes and Rob Gronkowski are two football players that launched NFTs towards the peak of the initial NFT madness in the spring. You then had other athletes like Damian Lillard and Bryson DeChambeau and Francis Ngannou and a few others do it. It's been mixed results. I think the mixed results stem from the fact that the athlete NFTs so far didn't necessarily have a long-term strategy to engage consumers. So, for example, Tamara mentioned they already have plans for next year, and based on purchasing the first NFT or the second NFT or all the NFTs, it creates experiences, whereas some of the player NFTs so far kind of sit in a silo and stand alone and kind of float in the ether. And so I don't think they have had tremendous amounts of success in that regard, but I think it's mainly, it's not due to the opportunity not being there. I just think that there hasn't been a breakthrough project yet from an athlete or from talent that brings real utility and a real ecosystem to, and really utilizes the power of the NFT, right? And so obviously I'm biased, but I think my brother is a great example of somebody that, listen, my brother's not a famous musician or a famous athlete, but he does have a large audience. He does have a large platform. And I think his unique approach of building an ecosystem centered around the community that he's built. One thing I glossed over is there is quite a bit of tangible real world access associated with a lot of the NFTs. So for example, there was 10,255 tokens that we sold. Each one of those can serve as a ticket to something called VCon, which is an annual conference. And so when you buy the NFT, you get this ticket that has a monetary value and access to an event where you can network with like-minded individuals. And my brother will obviously be there, and there'll be guest speakers and the whole nine. And so I just think it's still very early. It's extremely early, and I'm excited by the opportunities. And I guess I'll summarize by saying that I think as far as talent goes, it's been a mixed bag so far, but some good experimentation.
Yeah, well, I think that gives us a really well-rounded perspective, right, from both Tamara as well as you, AJ, in terms of, you know, how people are thinking about these NFTs and what they're doing with them. In terms of the potential, I know AJ touched upon this just now, the potential of these NFTs to kind of, you know, reshape how people interact with their sports team, how athletes can monetize their likeness, or other ways, other innovative ways that weren't previously there for engagement or revenue production. What do you guys see, you know, potential on the horizon? And I know some of that has already materialized based on what you've done, AJ, as well as Tamara, when you talked about the Hornets NFT launch. But do you see kind of other opportunities on the horizon? Maybe Tamara, to you first, and then AJ, back to you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, and you summarized it well, you know, our approach was not a monetization approach. It was a fan engagement approach. We wanted to be like a first mover in the space. That was our main goal. I think the NFT itself, in terms of the digital collectible, might be short-lived. I don't really see that being something that has a lot of long-term impact. But the blockchain and the technology that allows for authentication is huge. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of uses well beyond the sports world. But in the sports world, I think, you know, ticketing is one example. You guys talked about music licensing. One of the main challenges in the industry for licensing, obviously, is as between the artist and the label, the rights holders. And if you are somebody who's looking to license music like a sports team, it is a challenge. There's only clearinghouses for, you know, in-arena use at this time for public performance rights. There's not a centralized licensor for digital and social media use. And so I see that being a huge opportunity for that industry to utilize blockchain technology to do that authentication and licensing, so that the copyright holders are continuing to get their royalties throughout the life of the licensing, just like we would with ticket sales on the primary and secondary market, to eliminate those fraudulent sales. And the same thing with collectibles for artists and for teams.
Yeah, to jump in, I think for the most part, when people talk about NFTs, the majority of the conversation is focused on collectibles as well as art. But I think when you look at the back end of the smart contract and the power of the blockchain, I think there's just so much utility that goes beyond that. I think loyalty programs will be in a much better place due to blockchain. I think that's going to be important. I think the ease of being able to centralize everything under one quote unquote wallet. Now, that may be tricky if some things are on Flow and other things are on Ethereum, et cetera, but I do think you'll see cross-wrapping across blockchains and eventually the centralization of blockchains being able to talk to one another. And so I think customer data, loyalty programs will be important. Tamara mentioned ticketing. I think ticketing for concerts and sporting events, that'll be an important aspect of this. I've seen people dabbling with the idea of homes and the deeds to a home being tied to the blockchain. There was a well-known tech writer, Michael Arrington, who sold an apartment overseas via NFT, for example. So, you know, like anything, I think that there was a ton of buzz just a few months ago. There's still a ton of buzz. There's a lot of money and brands coming in and playing in the playground. But again, I said it earlier, I just think it's so early. I equate to the NFT landscape right now to the .com era in the mid-90s, right? Websites have come a long way in the last 10 to 20 years, and I think we're going to see the same thing as in regards to Web3, blockchain, and NFTs.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The market is very hot right now for the NFTs. We've seen a lot of, you know, mainstream institutional players get into what used to be kind of more of a fringe technology. So agree with you that there's a lot of potential. What, Tamara, has been the reaction in your experience coming from kind of the team and the professional sports world, who probably maybe 2 years ago maybe was not very familiar with NFTs, and all of a sudden it's become this super popular thing? What's been the general reaction? Has it been positive, negative? Like what are people saying?
Yeah, our fan base overwhelmingly was excited about our release, and we weren't sure what to expect in a smaller market like Charlotte. But there was a lot of demand, and our NFTs. So to take a step back, once we had the idea, we then had to execute it, right? And so we had to figure out how we were going to make it happen. And from landing on the idea to the game that we needed to release these for, we had like 3 weeks, and it was every single day was like a new challenge that we had to find a workaround for. And so in the course of just making it happen, we were also trying to make sure that we got the word out enough so that people would be interested in it, without revealing too much, because to be completely honest, until game day when we were going to drop the NFT, like we really didn't know if we were going to be ready. And we owe a lot of thanks to the programmers at Mint, who we use to mint our NFT, but we did everything else in-house. So we designed the NFT with the animation using our in-house graphics team. We sold the NFT through our app, through our Arena app, that we worked with our app provider and our F&B provider basically to use their POS so that we could run it through that way. There was a huge manual component because at the time, Mint hadn't yet been integrated with an online storefront. So that's why we did it that way. And we wanted to drop it in game so that we could generate the interest and the buzz, because there would be a lot of eyes on the drop. And so we found that people were really, really excited about it. We only released 88 in the first edition, and that was a callback to our inaugural season in 1988. And so they sold out in minutes. We did the second drop and they sold out in seconds. And then the third drop for the Venom was a lot less successful in that they didn't sell through as quickly. And I think that is attributed to the fact that there was no active event going on. I mean, there was a game, but 2K you view on Twitch. And so the broadcast through Twitch is a whole different crowd. And we were actually interested to see that because we thought for sure that the fan base for the 2K team would be a lot more educated and a lot more interested. And actually, I thought our design for that NFT was the best one. So not that buyers see it before it drops, but I just was excited about that one. And so it was interesting to see how that ultimately played out. But I'd say the reaction was really positive.
It's great. And I love how it kind of doesn't go where you think it's going to go. But all three of those sound like really great drops.
Hey, Catherine, to jump in, I want to say we have a question actually from the audience, and I would like to point out to everyone in the audience, if you have questions, put them in. If we don't get to them, we will respond to you off chain. But I thought this was worth bringing up to AJ and Tamara. The question is, what are your thoughts about NFTs in the fantasy sports world? Have you had any discussions or given any thought to it or heard anything about it?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Go ahead, AJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be super brief. I think it's very interesting. I think the blockchain especially allows for kind of multi-year, more like dynasty keeper league aspects to be very positive. There's a company called So Rare, which is a soccer fantasy platform where it basically mixes the hybrid of collecting NFTs with fantasy sports. So, for example, if you own a Mbappe NFT, that NFT serves as like a bonus to your counting stats, right? And so I'll use American football, for example. If you own a Patrick Mahomes NFT, you could have it be like a bonus where for, all the yards Mahomes throws for, if you own the Mahomes NFT, you get 5% more yards, which means you get 5% more points. So Rare is something I would recommend, sorare.com. My brother's actually an angel investor in that one, and I think that's a really interesting exercise in the intersection of fantasy and NFTs.
Yeah, I would just second that. I think that is a huge opportunity, and the interactive nature of it is going to be where the focus ends up going, just in my opinion. But sort of kind of the same way where you see some of the tokens are collectible for users completing microtasks and other types of gamification applications. So I do think that AJ is exactly right. That's going to be a really big opportunity to watch out for.
Have you guys given any thought to the role of NFTs, or really whether NFTs will shepherd in a little more activity in the sports entertainment world, in kind of the virtual world? A lot of people who've been active in the crypto space since before we all started, hearing about NFTs in the last several months, have real, lives and own properties and put on shows and art galleries in virtual spaces like crypto voxels, where NFTs can be used for things like mortgaging a virtual space or tickets to a virtual event. I'm curious whether you guys have any thoughts about that as well.
Tamara, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that will also be an iteration of it. I thought, honestly, it would be more like I was mentioning with our 2K team. It's interesting. I mean, esports is a whole other topic, but it's really interesting, the dynamic, because obviously we're still trying to hone in who exactly are the 2K fans. And for those of you who don't know, the NBA has a video game called NBA 2K. About 10 teams in the NBA also have 2K franchises associated with them. There's we have 6 human players, a coach, a GM, a scout, an analytics person. So it's a full staff organization, and it's a different fan base. And so I really thought that that fan base would be particularly interested in the NFT launch, and maybe they are, but it might be in a different way. They may not be interested in the digital ticket. And so I think kind of, what you're saying is a good point, which is, maybe it's more of an interactive NFT for some kind of virtual experience. There's definitely some other VR experiences that are maybe going to be associated there. And I think I probably am not going to get into much because it's a whole other area. But yeah, AJ, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the opportunity is there. I think if I'm being honest, I thought we'd be even further along today than we are. If you asked me that same question 5 years ago, I probably would have overshot it and overstated how much I think people would have participated. But I think you've seen, particularly in video games, I think a great example was Fortnite did a concert with Travis Scott maybe a year ago and got absurd attendance. And so I think maybe as the younger generation ushers in, it'll scale even faster. So it's there. I've played around with it. I think maybe for a certain demographic, it's not the most intuitive to get in there. But I think for a younger generation, especially you call it the young gamer, I think it'll accelerate the whole idea of participation in virtual events and virtual worlds.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and I know the concert you're talking about, it was kind of mind blowing, right? How engaging it was, not being a live concert. So definitely very, very exciting times that we live in. So I know I believe we might have time for one more topic, and then we might have to bring it to close. So in terms of, I know we had touched upon this a little bit earlier, but I know we focused a lot on the potential of the NFTs, like how engaging they can be, how they can create new revenue streams. On the flip side, do you guys see any potential pitfalls with NFTs, anything to be aware of when you're kind of dealing in this space?
I'll jump in quickly. From a consumer perspective, yes, there's just a very high barrier to entry. It's not the most intuitive. It's not the easiest. Something that we've seen on my brother's project, unfortunately, is that new consumers to blockchain and tech and this type of tech have fallen into some traps and scams. So one thing I'll throw out there is if you ever sign up for a MetaMask account, for example, which is a popular wallet for Ethereum in particular, never share your phrase. There's a seed phrase or a recovery phrase. Never share that phrase because that enables anybody to get into your wallet and act as you. So, definitely be on the watch out for, random messages on, Discord is a very popular place to hang out and talk about NFTs, and a lot of NFT projects are on Discord. And if you get a random message and it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. So that's one thing I'll highlight is, with the early crypto consumer, these are some of the smartest people in the world. And unfortunately, there's a small segment that are not necessarily the nicest people in the world. So there is the challenge and the danger of that. And then also just be really careful when you're transferring your assets, and, one wrong keystroke could mean you send your NFT into outer space and it's never found again, right? Make sure you keep your seed phrase, because if MetaMask asks you to enter it and you're unable to enter it, you'll never access your NFT again. So from a technical perspective and user experience perspective, I think that's worth calling out.
Yeah, I think that's right from the consumer perspective, and you guys already covered all the legal issues which are broad. But I think if you are an organization looking to create an NFT, you need to kind of decide why you're creating it and what your goal is, and then from there back into how you're going to do it. You want to make a decision early on as to whether you're going to be on Flow or Ethereum, because right now it's difficult to move your NFT from one blockchain to another. Like, the user's not going to be able to do that. You'd have to physically do that for them, which would be a really large undertaking depending on what you're doing. So you have to kind of pick your path, and you have to pick what else is available in the platform that you're going to be using to market and sell your NFT, and what the secondary market platform is going to be, because that's where your users are going to go to look to buy, sell, trade, exchange, those kinds of things. And so if you're doing a single site where the only NFTs available in that storefront are yours, just be mindful that your buyers, your users, are really going to only see your NFTs. So you want to look to see, are there any other storefronts that my NFT storefront can integrate with? What does it look like? What is the user experience? How easy or difficult are we looking to make this? And to AJ's point, we made sure that we kept it as simplistic from a consumer perspective as possible. I likened it to being no different than buying a hot dog from our mobile ordering app in the arena. It was literally just a purchase tile on the app that we pushed live at the time we dropped the NFT. You clicked on it, you put in your, your credit card information, you purchased your NFT for $4.99. You got a confirmation email. We then pushed an email to that person with a link that they clicked on, and they very easily just put in their username, an email address. And so they were creating a crypto wallet without even knowing that they were, which was just like a white label site ultimately that was Hornets branded, that, hosted their NFT. So I think all of those things are just considerations if you're looking to get into the space and mint an NFT. And then, of course, economic considerations of like, what are the costs of gas will impact your decision on which blockchain to go with, and which vendor, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, all great points. It's very exciting and lots of potential in the field, but also pitfalls to watch out for. So proceed with caution, obviously, would apply. Well, thank you both so much for that discussion. I think I was, super educational to hear about both of your experiences. John, I'm going to pass it back to you now to wrap up our webinar today.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both. I mean, that was so interesting. And I know we've gone over the 2:30 mark, and I think we could have kept going. It always feels like we're just scratching the surface, even with that somewhat of a deep dive. So I'm just going to close it out by thanking everyone for joining us today. And obviously a special thank you to AJ and Tamara for participating and sharing their experiences and perspectives and really just giving us a amazingly interesting discussion. I want to thank also the Foley marketing and tech personnel who helped us put all this together. Just so you know, if you're on this call and on the program, you will be getting an email with a thank you, which will include a link to the full presentation. And ultimately, this full seminar will be posted, on the NFT task force page at foley.com. I was looking at the question box. There was a lot of really interesting and thoughtful questions posed that we just didn't get to in the course of this. And as Andy said, we're just gonna follow up with those folks and we'll look to be in touch with you soon. And I hope we'll be back again with more interesting programming as everybody here, watches the developments in the NFT space. So happy 4th of July and have a great weekend. And we'll hopefully be seeing you all soon. Thanks so much, everyone.